Hi, everybody. Let's take a brief look and talk a little bit about our DLP options in the cloud. We did a video 1 or 2 weeks back about Gen AI, Microsoft 365 Copilot, or Copilot for Microsoft Grounded Chat, or a Graph, or whatever they're calling it now. Basically, the inside version of Copilot as opposed to the public side available in Bing. And we talked a little bit about some options for securing that, and that brought up a larger topic of DLP. And I just wanted to talk about, at a very high level, I'll try to stop at a high level. I know I get into too much detail more often than not, but I'll try and stop at a high level of the DLP options we have for different things, our Microsoft stuff, and even our outside stuff like Box and Dropbox, things like that, or even just random third-party sites, USB drives, whatever. So I'm going to try and separate the different options that we have at a very high level. Stick around. Okay, so I made a little PowerPoint for this because that's really the only creative thing I know how to use, apparently. If somebody's got a better tool for me, like something that's actually better I can use and it's easy, because when it comes to these creative things, I'm not too good at it. And every time I start to learn more, I think, oh no, I should be learning this other security topic a lot better than this, fun or fooling around topic, which I know I shouldn't think that way, but I do. Anyway, so I made a PowerPoint about this called DLP options. Clever, huh? All right. Well, let's see. So, and I didn't make an outline because I forgot. Doesn't matter. So let's start with this one. Everybody's familiar with this one. The Microsoft 365 Cloud DLP. This is basically SharePoint and Exchange, like 99% of it. So this came from Exchange, right? Back in the Exchange days when we had Exchange Server, it was the first place where DLP showed itself, and we had DLP policies for email, so that maybe you could be prevented from attaching a file that had a bunch of credit cards on it, or you could be prevented from just typing, in the email message a bunch of routing numbers or whatever was there. And then that got us a little bit also into the information protection in the form of the rights management service, which I'll mention in a minute here as well. But that went on to the Microsoft in the Cloud DLP for Exchange with the same options, just a lot better and a lot more configurable. But now that it's up there, we also can use it for SharePoint sharing and OneDrive sharing. And since SharePoint is the back end of Teams and Teams files, Teams sharing, right? So that's basically it. There's two big ways that we can get information to someone outside of the company. One is we can create a sharing link hopefully for guests, but by default you can do it for just any anonymous user. But let's just assume it's for guests and that we've done our work in shutting down anonymous access to SharePoint sites and files. So we can block sharing of sensitive information in policies, so like credit cards. Again, we can say, well, if you detect 100 credit cards in a file that's in SharePoint, and someone is attempting to share that file, a link, with a guest, we don't let that happen, right? And you can imagine all sorts of different scenarios. But we're sharing it. We're not actually sending the physical file somewhere. This is sharing stuff. And normally when we send physical files, when we think of that, we're thinking of email. Putting a file into an email attachment, a copy of it, right? because it's not the actual file. If we send an actual attachment, it's a copy of the file. So we want that file read and have the Exchange service look at that before it sends it out. But we could also send a link as an attachment. And everybody's seen this when you try and share something. It asks you, do you want to share a cloud attachment or a copy of it? You get those two different options there. So now we know what that is. I'm sure you guys, savvy as you are, knew that already. I always bring it up, though, because it's a weird thing when you first see it. Even after you see it for a while, people ignore it for years without really even knowing what it means. So, but that's what we do. Now, Teams has an extra thing, chat, right? The chat service is a truly separate service from SharePoint and Exchange. A lot of Teams functionality, man, I'd say, 90% of what we use Teams for is actually inside of either SharePoint or inside of Exchange. But this chat part of it's different. And you can have DLP policies for stuff in the chat service. So if I were to paste 10 credit card numbers in a chat and say, hey, look, take a look at this, it could detect that, right? So that comes into play as well. I didn't put that into this slide, but you get the idea. So this is the traditional DLP we think of, right? We're protecting our Microsoft 365 information from going elsewhere. All right, but that's not all we can worry about, right? What about third-party SaaS apps? Box, Dropbox, Salesforce, or just random, URL places, on the internet where we might want to upload files, whatever. How do we protect against that? Well, the first thing most people think of is cloud app security or a cloud app security broker, a CASB, MCAS for Microsoft CAS, MCASB, whatever you want to call it, Microsoft. Although they used to call it that, of course, now it comes under the Defender umbrella, and their CASB is now called Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. You must have the word apps at the end there to differentiate it from Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which is the Azure, AWS, and things like that, and the schematized assets and whatnot. So Defender for Cloud Apps is the actual CASB. We'll think of that, right? But there's something else you should be thinking about, which is Defender for Endpoint. Why? Well, let's go to my slide on Defender for Cloud Apps. Oh, I gotta move my video. Let me move it over here. You guys have seen me do this before. I'm vain enough to need my picture on the screen at all times. So sometimes I got to move it right and left. What's the purpose of doing a video and an audio if you can't see me and can't hear me? I love being on stage. It's a personal fault, or is it? I don't know. So this is kind of my way of sort of being on stage while I'm not on stage. All right, so Defender for Cloud Apps, aka CASB. I put that in there. So I drew some nice pictures here. First thing to know about the Cloud App Security Broker is it's really not meant for random URLs, random stuff on the internet that we don't control. You can use it to give you a list of what people are going to, like, hey, there's these 20 people went to Box, these 500 people went to Salesforce. And it looks like half the company's using Salesforce. Hey, there's a bunch of people going to these different Gen AI sites, ChatGPT. Sure, it can see that stuff is going on. It knows those URLs, and you can get that kind of reporting. Not from the Cloud App Security Broker. It doesn't know how to do that. It's only the repository for this kind of information getting sent to it. Where's the information come from? Well, a couple of places. We can have some kind of firewall that everybody goes through if we're at the company, which nobody is anymore, right? Few places are. Still exists. And we can have that firewall log. We can have that log uploaded to the Cloud App Security Broker, Defender for Cloud Apps. And that log will tell it, yeah, everybody here, people went here, people went there. That's great. There's another place that you can do this as well. You can gain this information. And that's from the devices themselves, but you'll have to onboard them to the Defender for Endpoint and or Defender for Purview. It's the same onboarding process. Okay, Defender for Purview is really where we get the endpoint or Defender endpoint DLP. See, my brain doesn't work. Endpoint DLP. But it's the same onboarding process. So you onboard to one, you onboard to the other, and really we onboard to Defender for Endpoint, and then it gets onboarded to the other thing. So we'll talk about that probably in some upcoming videos. I'm actually working on another DLP project, so while I'm up to my neck in it, I'll probably throw in a video about that because it'll all be fresh in my brain. Anyway. The problem with cloud app security brokers, including Defender for Cloud Apps, is in order to do any DLP work, prevent things from going up to Box in this case, you have to be in control of Box. You have to be the administrative authority, your company. We have to be the administrative authority in Box, which means that we have to set up SSO between Box and our Microsoft Entra ID. That means people have to be using our Entra accounts to go up to Box, right? So we got to set up SAML SSO first of all, hopefully provisioning so our users get created up there and get removed if we delete them or disable them. Step one. Step two, we have to tell Defender for Cloud Apps that we want to start controlling information going to and from Box by our users, which means we have to connect Box to MCAS. And when you do that and users start going up to Box, they'll actually see the address. It'll change from the box.com to the MCAS reverse proxy. So they'll actually be able to see that in most browsers. Edge is changing a little bit. Microsoft is changing how Microsoft Edge works, and you don't see that now because they're actually trying to move a lot of this functionality to Edge. We'll talk about that in another video, but let's ignore that. Everything's going to go through the Defender for Cloud Apps. So now you can see my purple here. This is people after I've made the connection. I've done the SAML SSO. First of all, my apps, right? Enterprise app. Then I've connected Box to Defender for Cloud Apps as a connected app. Now I get this new path. And inside of that path, inside of this cloud thingy there, you see a little square that says DLP rules right there. Right? Yes, the Defender for Cloud App has DLP rules. Now I can inspect stuff that I'm pushing up to Box. And if it's got, again, 100 credit cards in it, we can have Defender for Cloud Apps tell the user, yep, that's not good. Maybe we let them override or not, but that's where the DLP rules work. We can also, if we connect it, we can take advantage of what Box allows us to do because we can reach into Box and do stuff as well. That's what the APIs that you hear about for Defender for Cloud Apps, that's what those do. These are functionalities that Box allows. It allows us to reach in and do different things. Box might allow a couple, like 5, 10 things. Dropbox might allow half of those or more or different things. It depends on the SaaS app itself and what they allow. So, but we could use these APIs to go in there and look at files, whatever Box allows, and we could find files maybe that are labeled, or maybe we want to label files that are up there, whatever. It might even have some DLP functionality. Who knows? But we catch stuff on its way up to Box. So that's Defender for Cloud Apps. We can't do DLP, random DLP, using this for random URLs. We have to be in control of those URLs. We have to have Entra signing people onto them. So it's very controlled. We can't just block stuff, DLP, for random URLs with Defender for Cloud Apps, the KSB. It's how all KSBs work. Obviously, there's more to them than what I'm talking about. But if we're talking about DLP and uploading stuff, you got to be in control of the SaaS app. And then you can control information going to and from it just like you can to the Office apps. Let's talk about Endpoint DLP. Aha! Endpoint DLP gets us a little closer to being able to block information transactions with stuff that we're not in control of, right? Like if we didn't have Box, if we weren't in control of that, we could actually use Endpoint DLP to block uploads of files to Box.com just in general. How do we do that? Well, excuse me. For DLP and the Microsoft 365, going back a couple of slides, all of the functionality here, most of it happens, I should say most, happens in the cloud, right? But the cloud itself, the DLP there, it actually communicates some DLP rules with Microsoft apps like Outlook. Right? It'll communicate some stuff with Outlook, but it's still kind of, in the realm of the cloud. Cloud controls it all, the Office 365 cloud. Defender for Cloud Apps, the DLP happens in that Cloud App section. So also in the cloud, just another part of the cloud, the MCAS part of the Microsoft cloud. And some stuff can happen in the third-party SaaS apps as well with those API connectors. Endpoint DLP happens on the endpoint. Communications go down to the endpoint. Windows was the first endpoint. Macintosh you can do a little bit now as well. They onboarded Macintosh to Endpoint DLP a couple of years ago. So now I can tell the endpoint itself, hey, I need you to watch for what users are doing to my sensitive information, like credit cards or like labeled documents, and I don't want you to allow uploads to certain domains. I don't care if I'm in control of those domains or not. Doesn't matter. I don't want your browser to talk to these domains with these files. I don't want that to happen. That requires a lot of work on the endpoint. The browsers have to be involved, right? So we can assume Edge is involved, right? Edge was built for this. Sure it was. Microsoft's in charge of it. What about other browsers? Not so much. But Chrome, Google Chrome and Mozilla Firefox have a Purview add-in or extension or whatever we want to call it that you can put in there, and you'll have to have control over them and use something like Intune or Group Policies to add those extensions in so that they're not removable. And then those browsers will work just like Edge for the most part for endpoint DLP. So it requires more work on the endpoint. They have to be under our control. First of all, totally have to be under our control just to onboard them to the service in the first place. And then we have to push down some policies so that these browsers, if we're using third-party browsers, if we're allowing that, can work. And then the endpoint DLP itself can actually disallow other browsers. One of the things it can do. So in context of uploading stuff, uploading files, we can have these files inspected on the endpoints themselves and then block those uploads, block the browsers from using them to go to certain places. So it's pretty cool functionality. What else can we do? Well, block on the left there, block upload to domains, and you can have an allow list and block lists. You can also, if you're worried about file uploads like this, the other way it happens is I will install the sync app, Box sync app, Dropbox sync app, G Drive, whatever Google's thing, sync app, right? OneDrive sync app, we might not want to block that one, but you get the idea. We can actually block those as well and tell Endpoint DLP, don't allow these sync apps to touch files that match our DLP conditions. A couple other things, block transfer to USB, yeah, that makes sense. Block copy and cut, so block stuff going to the clipboard. That's important as well because people might be doing that in order to paste stuff somewhere on the internet, right? Because that we get into a gray area there. Are we uploading files? Or are we just taking stuff that's in the clipboard and putting it into a browser? That's much harder to control because once it's in the browser, then what do we have? The browser doing DLP work? It gets very technical, and that's tough to do. So we can block transfers of information into the clipboard, and that's just blocked from wherever you might want to paste it because it never gets into the clipboard. And then we can block print. A couple other things involved there, but that's for the most part, that's it. So endpoint DLP, this kind of takes over where Defender for Cloud Apps fails for just uploads to URLs that we don't control. Now, this will block uploads whether it doesn't have to be Entra, we don't have to have SSO or SAML connected at all. This just relies on URLs. Hey, if a file matches our DLP rules, we don't let that file get uploaded to, box.com or Dropbox or whatever. So big difference between endpoint DLP and working with URLs on the internet like box.com and Defender for Cloud Apps, the CASB. Defender for Cloud Apps, we have to be in control of it. And we get a lot of super, awesome control once we've done that, once we've connected those apps. But, there's a lot of services out there that we don't control. People aren't even supposed to be using them. So we can do a couple things. We could actually just use some kind of secure web gateway to block communication with box.com entirely, or these Gen AI sites. Just block them all. Don't talk to them at all. It's going to cause a little friction probably, but you could also do that. Microsoft does this, by the way, in Defender for Endpoint. Actually, Defender for Endpoint Plan 1. Basically, it's some Intune settings that we can send down, and we can tell Edge and the other browsers. But we tell Edge, hey, Edge, don't let people talk to chatgpt.com or whatever the URL might be. We can just tell it's not allowed. Chrome and Firefox can also participate in that. Again, we require an add-in extension, the Microsoft account one, or Entra SSO. They keep changing the names. Google changed its name from Windows Account, I think, to Entra SSO. Anyway, that's got to be installed. And then we also have to turn on Windows something called network protection, and that allows these two other browsers, really any app on the device, pretty much, to use the same protections that Edge has. It works at the network level, TCP and DNS level. So we block stuff at that level. So again, we got to have control over the devices to do that. And those are total blocks. So do we just want to block DLP stuff that's sensitive to us, or do we want to completely block it because we don't know what people are putting up there, and we're unsure about the whole thing? We just want to block it. So we can do that too. All right. So those are the main differences. I put a couple of other things in there. Oops, got to move my face over again one more time. Other DLP options. Well, information protection, sensitivity labels. We can encrypt files and put rights on them so only certain people can decrypt and read them. Well, that's DLP as well, right? You could call it DLP. Insider risk, another sort of a DLP thing from Microsoft. Again, there's some gray area here. Information boundaries, keeping people from different departments from talking to each other, sharing with each other. App protection policies, a big thing for personal mobile devices, where we encrypt stuff in Outlook and Teams and OneDrive on the phone, and we can wipe it, again, so that data doesn't remain on the phone or get copied to other places on the phone. BitLocker, FileLocker for Mac. I think it's called FileLocker, right? File Vault, File Locker, whatever. Anyway, we send down policies from Intune or group policies or whatever, JamF. We're using Macintosh and we don't want to use Intune exclusively. But we encrypt those drives so that information on those drives that the device is stolen cannot be extracted. We can also wipe devices if we have them enrolled in Intune. Another great option. Communication compliance, that's another thing from Microsoft. That's sort of like DLP, where we're looking for unethical communications going back and forth, harassment, but some regulatory stuff as well. Prev is in there for privacy, for GDAP or GD, the European now I got GDAP in my head, so you know what I'm talking about. GDPR requests, so that's sort of in there as well. Some other stuff. So that's it. I figured I just wanted to get a big, quick 30,000 foot view. And of course, I have rambled on incessantly, as is my habit. So I hope you forgive me. Till next time, stay safe out there and get ready for some more DLP stuff and Copilot, Gen AI stuff, information protection, sensitivity labels. We're going to have to revisit that again in the upcoming weeks. All right, everybody, stay safe out there.